want to start today's show with a personal story. So, a year or so ago, I was sitting on the beach with half a dozen or so people. And at age 56 at the time, I was the oldest in the group by at least a decade. And somehow the conversation turned to, what age did you peak? And these folks, most of them in their late 30s or early 40s, went around describing when they thought they each peaked. And the responses varied, some stating right before their first child or when they were in college. And I can't recall all of the responses, but I distinctly remember that all of them were in the past. And when it came my turn, I remember telling them like I felt like I was peaking right now and that I wasn't sure that the best wasn't still out in front of me. So before we start today's show, take a minute and reflect. Have you peaked? Are your best days behind you? Or is it possible that your best days still lie ahead? Hello and welcome to the Over 50 Health and Wellness Show. I'm your host, Kevin English. I'm a certified personal trainer and nutrition coach, and my mission is to help you get into the best shape of your life, no matter your age. We have a great show for you today. Dr. Ellen Albertson is here to share with us how to make the second half of our lives the best half. But before we get to that, I want to let you know that today's show is brought to you by the Silver Edge. The Silver Edge is my online personal training and nutrition coaching business where I help you get off the exercise and diet hamster wheel and start making permanent healthy lifestyle changes so that you can enjoy the second half of your life with strength and confidence and show up as the healthiest, strongest, most vital version of yourself, no matter your age. If you're interested in learning more, send me an email at coach@silveredgefitness.com and we'll start a conversation. My promise to you is no hard sales pitch, no annoying, incessant follow-up emails, just an introductory conversation about your personal fitness goals. Okay, enough of that. Let's get on with today's show. My guest today is Dr. Ellen Albertson. Dr. Ellen, aka the Midlife Whisperer, is a midlife coach, speaker, author, and, in her own words, has more degrees than a thermometer, including a master's in nutrition and a PhD in psychology. In addition, she's a board-certified health and wellness coach and a Reiki Master. Her mission is to help empower people at midlife to get unstuck and find the energy, confidence, and clarity to make their next chapter their best chapter. In today's episode, we discuss the 7 steps to rocking your midlife from Dr. Ellen's upcoming book titled Rock Your Midlife, 7 Steps to Transform Yourself and Make Your Next Chapter Your Best Chapter, which will be available November 9th. I asked Ellen how she came to be known as the Midlife Whisperer.
Well, I started my career in the health and wellness field about 30 years ago. I became a registered dietitian. And, I quickly realized that I didn't actually have the skills to help people with behavior change. I was really good at eat this, don't eat that, but actually getting people to change was really something that when I was in school to become a dietitian, I really didn't cover. So it's kind of been a journey of first becoming a health and wellness coach and then becoming a psychologist and really learning how to work with people. Because what I find, and I'm sure you find this, Kevin, in your business too, it's not about the food. It's like there's something underneath it that people that I work with are eating because they're not feeling great about their lives. So I think I got to this place of being the Midlife Whisperer from a combination of really wanting to work skillfully with people and help people make really substantial changes from a place of not self-loathing. I used to be there, but from a place of self-love because I love myself and I want to be healthy, having really good skills. And, I'm at midlife and I was going through midlife myself and the ups and downs of health crisis and kids, teens, and I went through a divorce. And So did a lot of transforming on my own, and the idea of a Midlife Whisperer just sort of popped into my head about 2, 3 years ago. It just sort of, the universe was like, yeah, that's what you do. You're the Midlife Whisperer. So I love what I do. And I think primarily I fell into this because all my clients were at midlife, and realizing that midlife, as you know, people at midlife have very different needs, both in terms of what they need nutritionally, what they need in terms of their workouts, and what's going on in their lives. So it's a lot of fun. I love this time of life. I'm in it, the thick of it, and it's awesome.
Yeah, I'm with you 100% on that. I love that. And obviously, I think our listeners can hear your passion as you talk about that. So before we back up and talk about, maybe define what midlife is, you had mentioned that you wanted to promote change, not from a place of self-loathing, I hate the way I am, but rather from a place of self-love. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. And I can talk a little bit my own story. I was in that place of self-loathing for the longest time, negative body image. I was one of those personal trainers you see on the floor, those women who lead the group exercise classes, working out 4 to 6 hours a day, watching every calorie. And no matter what I did, I just hated my body, because body image is in your mind. It's not actually what your body looks like. And there was always this idea with my clients too, when I get the perfect body, whatever the heck that means, then I'll love myself. And so, but what ends up happening is, if you've got your backpack filled with self-loathing, in the future, I'll love myself, you carry that self-loathing into your future and it never shows up. So now what I do is I start with self-love. And what happens is everything unfolds from there. When you love yourself, you want to take care of your body. You don't want to do all of that negative self-talk. And actually, my research was on self-compassion and body image in women. And what my research showed is when you practice self-compassion, which is essentially treating yourself the way you would a good friend, what ends up happening is body shame goes down, body dissatisfaction goes down, self-worth based on appearance goes down, and body appreciation increases. Has nothing to do with changing your body, has everything to do with changing your mind and changing your relationship with yourself. But everything changes the moment you decide that, hey, I'm going to really learn to treat myself like a good friend.
Yeah, I love that. And I certainly appreciate that. And that resonates with me. And I think that obviously it's a lot easier said than done for a lot of folks, depending on where you're coming from. But that change of coming from a place of self-love, I love your way of putting that. You said you can't carry that self-loathing, for example, in a backpack with you, because when you do, that arrives at that future state with you. Yeah, that's all fantastic. So let's talk a little bit about midlife. What is midlife?
That's such a great question. And I think, we're redefining it, right? I mean,
exactly. Yeah.
If you put midlife in Google, what comes up is crisis. So like that it's conjoined twins and the wrong side of 40. For me, midlife is really a second adulthood. I feel like you've got this first adulthood, your 20s, your 30s, and then your 40s, 50s, into your 60s. And it's like, hey, who do I really want to be? What really makes me happy? How do I want to take care of myself? But I think in terms of the actual period, to me, it's kind of that period of life when you realize that there is more time behind you than in front of you. So you're realizing that I really want to make some changes in my life, but I'm really here to say that it can be the absolute best time of your life. And I think both of us are here to really bunk this idea that it's all downhill. I mean, if you're carrying that into your future, that's what's going to show up. But I'm finding that, I'm empty nest. I was divorced for about 4 years. I'm in a great new positive relationship with somebody who really resonates with me. I'm uber healthy, not again because I'm trying to lose weight or anything, just because I love my body and it's fun to eat healthy and take care of yourself. So midlife is this time where, there's less time in front of you, but I think it really wakes you up that I'm running out of time. And it's kind of a wake up call that there are things I want to do. There's a way I want to be. I want to enjoy my life more. So I think it can really be a profoundly satisfying time of life.
Yeah, obviously, I agree with you 100%, but that's not the common narrative, right? That's not what we hear. That's not what media typically shows. To your point, if you Google midlife, you're going to get midlife crisis is probably going to be the number one thing. And when we think about people that are in the second act of their life, we don't often think of them living their best ever lives. And certainly that's why I'm so passionate about doing what I do, because I do feel like I'm as healthy and as fit as I've ever been in my entire life at 57. And I feel like the best is yet to come. So trying to amplify that message, to normalize that, and to be an example that that's how we should be, as opposed to this other, oh no, my best years are behind me and now what's in front of me is all downhill from here, which is what we commonly hear, I think, in media and even from our peers sometimes.
Yeah, well, the media, let's talk about media a little bit. The media wants you to feel bad because if you felt good about yourself, you wouldn't buy all their
Mm,
stuff, you know? It's like
yeah.
this, and there's also this idea that if I change the outside, you know, if I get a new haircut or buy some new clothes, or even if I lose weight, then everything in the inside is going to change. I'm going to feel happy. But it's really about that inner change first, and like realizing that, you know, the media is there to sell you stuff and you don't need any stuff to rock midlife and feel good about yourself.
No, you don't. You don't need any stuff to rock midlife. And I think that's a great segue here. So you've got a new book coming out, I believe November 9th. It's called Rock Your Midlife. Is that right?
That's right. Rock Your Midlife, 7 steps to transform yourself and make your next chapter your best chapter.
7 steps to transform yourself and make your next chapter your best chapter. And in that book, you've got 7 steps. And I thought it'd be fun to kind of go through those and talk about each one a little bit and give folks a taste of what's in this book. So step one is, and I think this is a beautiful segue from what you just said, is who am I really, from confused to authentic? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So it really is drilling down to figure out, you know, who you really are. What are your strengths? What do you love to do? What are you passionate about? You know, so often we go through life and we do things because we want to please other people, or our culture says, you know, this is what success really means. And I find, like with myself or a lot of my clients, it's like you're climbing up a ladder of success, but it's up against the wrong building because it's not what success means to you. So in this chapter, what it's really all about in this step is just, you know, I give people lots of exercises. So the book's very much, you know, there's some more, there's client stories, but there's also real coachy things that people can do to really transform. So there are lots of different tests that you can take to find out what your strengths are and leaning into what am I really good at. So often we want to like fix our weaknesses, but that really doesn't work. It's much better to partner up with other people who are strong where you're weak and really, you know, work together that way. So authenticity is really finding out, like, who am I on the deepest level? Like, what am I all about? I have people thinking about, like, what did I love to do as a kid? What would you do all day long if you could? Like, I know you're passionate about exercise. Me too. I mean, when I look at my strengths, self-regulation is one of my top character strengths, as is spirituality, public speaking, these things that I'm doing now, things that I am naturally good at. So when you know who you are in the deepest level, then you have a lot of confidence. You don't have to wear a mask and cover things up. You have more energy. You feel good about yourself. It's like, be the youest you. No one can tell you you're doing it wrong. So it's really, that's key, because if you don't know yourself, if you want to rock midlife, if you're not really being your true self, you're not going to be able to create a life that feels really good to you. So that is step one, is just figuring out, all, you know, you think about authenticity, it all has the same root. You are the author of your life. You get to decide who you want to be, how you want to show up, what you want to do.
Yeah, and that's one of the hallmarks, I think, of midlife, right? That's one of the things that happens there is, I mean, there's life changes, right? Most of us, we end up with, you know, empty nesters. We're for the first time considering retirement or even career change. In my case, from going from corporate America to doing something that I'm truly passionate about. And I found myself in my 50s saying, well, what do I want to be when I grow up? And to your point, it's what would I do if I had $1 bazillion and money was off the table? It wasn't a concern. What would I do? And so I'm doing it. And once you find out who you are and you're living from that authentic place, things change drastically. It's less that kind of 9 to 5 drudgery. And, you know, we've got spouses, we got kids, we got to get up and go to work. And there's this routine and we just kind of fall into that. And I think that this second half is this whole new reawakening. It's this new chapter, and it can be the best chapter. So step number one is we got to figure out who we are really in order to live our authentic life. Is that a fair way of paraphrasing that?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really, you know, the caterpillar to the butterfly thing, you know, and I mean, it's a metaphor we use a lot when we're talking about transformation. What's so interesting about it is that the caterpillar and the butterfly have the exact same DNA. So it's not like you're going to totally change everything, but they are showing up in a different new way. And, you know, the butterfly is not being like, oh, I want to go back to being the caterpillar. It's saying, hey, I'm a butterfly now. This is who I am. I'm free. I can fly. And so when you really know yourself, like yourself, you're flying, you're doing your podcast, you're influencing so many people. I often tell people, start with your why. Think about like, what change do I want to see in the world right now? I mean, the world's a bit of a mess right now. Let's be truthful. There's so much to do on so many levels. You are here for a reason. Each and every single one of us is sort of part of this new, we want to call it the age of Aquarius, whatever you want to call it, but we need to fix the planet. We need to fix up the environment. We need to fix the way we take care of our bodies. But you have an authentic mission. It might be just influencing a couple of people. Maybe you're going to influence thousands of people, but it really is about figuring out who you are first.
100%. Okay, so let's go to step number 2. Step number 2 is befriend yourself, and that's moving from self-loathing to self-love. And I know we've already touched on this, but let's dive in a little deeper into this.
Sure. Well, really, the how of that is self-compassion. And that's something that, I'm a self-compassion teacher. Self-compassion has totally changed my life. So it's helpful to think about sort of the 3 elements of self-compassion. Because we always say like, love yourself, but like, how the heck do you do it? And practicing self-compassion, essentially treating yourself like a good friend, is how you do it. And Kristen Neff, who is one of my mentors, defines self-compassion with 3 elements. So you are moving from the self-loathing to the self-love by first being kind to yourself rather than critical. So it's that self-talk, talking to yourself the way you would a good friend. If we talk to our friends the way we talk to ourselves or our bodies, we wouldn't have any friends. So you start off by like, okay, I'm going to not be so judgmental. I'm going to be kind to myself. And that is the first element. The second element is common humanity, knowing that everybody struggles. We're all perfectly imperfect. Nobody is perfect. I know a lot of people that I work with, they're perfectionists. They want to do everything perfect. But I'm such the school of done is better than perfect. I'm such the school of, sometimes I'm a bit of a hot mess. I'm not perfect. And I think that that's really important when you realize if something's going wrong in your life, that it's normal, then you don't feel so alone. And like, let's face it, right now, there's a lot going wrong. We're all struggling, right? We're all experiencing a lot of challenges, and they realize that this is part of common humanity, that everybody goes through this. And the third element is mindfulness. So with mindfulness, you're aware when you're stressed and struggling. So just like, if you had a friend who was stressed or struggling and she called you up or he called you up and said, hey, I really need some help right now. You'd get on the phone, you'd go over there and fix them dinner. You'd, be there and be supportive, but you have to notice when you're stressed and struggling. With ourselves, we go right into fix-it mode, or we go right into like, self-deprecation mode. Like, oh my God, I'm so stupid. Why is this happening to me? We start ruminating. With self-compassion, it's like, whoa, I just got in a fender bender, or I just got a difficult health diagnosis, or something happened at work, or something happened with my partner. You stop and you put your hand on your heart and go, wow, this is really hard. How can I support myself? So you're mindful. And that's really where, that's kind of the how-to of self-love. And the beautiful thing about self-compassion, it's like a muscle. Like, when people are building muscle, you got to like stretch yourself. You get little tears in the muscle fibers and they grow back bigger and stronger. Same thing with self-compassion. You start practicing self-compassion, that muscle grows over time. The research really shows that when you treat yourself like a good friend, you get better and better at it. You're more compassionate with other people. And the research also shows that it helps reduce stress, depression, and anxiety. And it also helps the things like optimism, well-being, happiness, joy. So it kind of works both ends. So it truly is magical.
Yeah, 100%. And I love that idea of that self-talk that you had mentioned, that there are things that we say to ourselves that we would never in a million years say to a dear friend. And we need to learn to treat ourselves with that same kind of compassion, right? When a friend is in a difficult place, it's our job to empathize with them and to love them, and certainly not to be mean and critical, which is often that's kind of the automatic response internally to ourselves. So changing that self-talk to that very compassionate self-talk. And to your point, you got to get the reps in. You have to practice that. And just like a muscle, it grows slowly over time. It's not something that happens overnight. So let's move to step number 3, and that is energizing yourself from pooped to supercharged. I'm anxious to hear what you have to say on this one. How do we energize ourselves?
Yeah, well, first, all the things that we do. That's the first piece of eating. I advocate the one diet that does it all is whole foods, plant-based. And, as you said in your, I think it was podcast 71, you don't need to be vegan. But, for me, I eat vegan, 95% of the time. But, once in a while, I'll have a cheeseburger or I live in Vermont, I'll have a creamy. It's okay. I'll have a glass of wine. So the diet that does it all, more whole foods, plant-based. You got to eat right. You are what you eat. The food energizes you. And I think we need to get away from all of these crazy cockamamie diets. It really...
100%, yes.
Again, media wants to make it confusing because how exciting is it to say eat more plants, don't eat anything your grandmother wouldn't have eaten, right? So stay away from all the processed foods and eat till you're satisfied, not stuffed. If you do those three things, your body will thank you. Make sure you're getting enough water. Rest is super important. I know you probably feel the same way, Kevin. It's like I know for myself, I overdid working out. And I see this a lot for women and men too at midlife. They overdo it. I know I move, I probably exercise 1 to 2 hours a day because I like it. I don't even call it exercise. I ride my bike. I go for a swim. I lift weights a couple times a week, but you don't overdo it. Body needs time to rest, but moving your body is super important. And, rest is important, and also in terms of sleep. It's really important to get that 7 to 8 hours of sleep a night. So that's sort of the actual physiological things. But underneath that too, I talk a lot about your vibration, because we are energetic beings. You may think that you're solid, but on the sort of the quantum level, if you took a powerful microscope, and you looked at your cells, you would see that it's just bajillions of atoms moving very, very fast. So we are energetic beings. And so it's also about, working with your energy, which is about giving yourself permission and doing what you need to feel good. I'll say that again, like feel good. Like when you're doing something that's draining your energy, can you cut that out? Can you do more of those things that energize you, that make you happy, that going back to the authenticity, things that you're naturally good at, and less of those things that are draining, that are frustrating, that really, sap the juice from you. So there's sort of this energetic component of really living a high vibe life. Yes, eating high vibe foods, drinking water, getting rest, but also, mentally and, spiritually, all of the stuff of feeling good and doing those things that really light you up and keep you energized. If you don't think you're an energetic being, just think about it. Every cell of your body came from sunlight. Everything you eat either comes from plants or it comes from animals that eat the plants. So you really are made of sunlight. You are energy, and it's important to check in and have daily rituals that really keep you energized. Things like doing breath work, for example, or, getting out in nature, making sure you're grounding or walking barefoot on the earth, things that are going to keep your energetic level super high.
Fantastic. Yeah, I love that you start at that physiological level there. And I kind of think of that as a three-legged stool, right? We have to eat. And clearly, I'm a huge proponent of whole foods. And Mom was right. You need to eat veggies. You doesn't have to eat your veggies, folks. Eat whole foods, mostly plants. You talked about the exercise or the movement component of that. So that would be the second leg of that stool. And then the third one would be that recovery piece. And in there, obviously recovering from exercise, but really more it's that working on stress management, getting the appropriate sleep, etc. And then you moved into that we are energetic beings. And as we feed that and recognize that and live that higher vibration life, doing more of what we love, really makes us complete folks and can move us from poop to supercharged. So on step number 4, you have reprogram your brain from muddy waters to crystal springs. How do we move from those muddy waters to crystal springs?
Yeah, so you have to learn how to work productively with your mind. And unfortunately, our mind doesn't want us to really be happy. It's helpful to really understand the way that the brain works. So the brain is really designed to keep you safe. And so that's why we ruminate, why we have a lot of negative thoughts. And so negative thoughts are like Velcro, they stick. Positive thoughts are like Teflon, they slide off. And so to really, get clear, to stay away from the stressful thoughts, we really have to get disciplined with our minds. Unfortunately, there are so many techniques that can do that, starting with, we just talked about a healthy diet, getting fresh air, getting enough sleep. It's also really important to discipline yourself to not go into that negative space. And I give a lot of different exercises in the book where people can actually question their negative thoughts, really asking, if you have a thought like, I'm sure you get this a lot, Kevin, oh, I'll never, get back to the weight or the health that I had in my 30s. And really asking yourself, is that really true? This is something from the work of Byron Katie that I love. Asking yourself, is it really true? So questioning these self-limiting beliefs that really keep you in those muddy waters. Is it true? Can I be 100% sure it's true? When I have this thought, how does it make me feel? And who would I be and how would I feel if I didn't have this thought? And then find another thought to replace it. When you're ruminating, realize that ruminating is keeping you stuck. Rumination is a word that comes from, again, I live in Vermont and we've got cows and goats, these ruminant animals that chew the cud over all the time. Your brain thinks it's going to figure things out by chewing it over again and again and again, but that really keeps you stuck in the muck. So if you want to be crystal clear, you got to work on your mind. Mindfulness is also really awesome. It's a little different than the mindfulness I talked about with self-compassion. Mindfulness around being present with what you're experiencing. So we're talking right now, I'm very present. I'm focused on you. I'm not thinking about what I'm making for dinner tonight or worrying about my kids or anything. I'm focused on what I'm doing at the present moment. And what's so exciting about mindfulness is that when you are present, you turn off what's called the default mode network, which is a part of your brain that's constantly looking around for what could possibly be wrong, defining yourself, again, keeping you in sort of this negative place. And so there's so many things you can do to work more productively with your mind and really get that sense of clarity and peace and calm that I think so many of us want. I'll just say one more quick hint of that too. Listen to positive podcasts like Kevin's, right? Turn the regular news media off. That sort of turning, if it bleeds, it leads stuff, right? It's so draining. So often I'll have my clients just go on a media fast, read a book, listen to a positive podcast, meditate, or just leave your cell phone at home and go for a long walk in the woods. But do things that raise your vibration, that clarify your mind, that get you out of those muddy waters.
Yeah, that's a great point. Our brain is evolutionarily designed to keep us alive and to sense danger, and therefore it doesn't always serve us, especially in these modern times where our dangers are much, much different than they were thousands of years ago, right? So that rumination and trying to work on being present, which brings you a little closer to that flow state, which we're all trying to achieve and get that max performance. We clearly can't do that when we're in this muddy state versus this crystal spring state. I love that. So moving along, you have step number 5 is to empower yourself. We're going to go from helpless to in charge. How do we move from helplessness to being in charge?
Yeah, empowerment means different things to different people, but really first understanding that you have agency. So many of my clients are like, well, I want to have agency. I want to have power over my life. And if you're listening to this, you have power over your life. You don't have power over anybody else. We get into this place where we sort of put all of our problems on somebody else. Well, it's because my wife is this way, or my husband is this way. I've got my kids. I'm, worrying about, I have to keep this job because of money. It's like realizing that you are able to change your life. You are in charge of your life. You are a powerful being. And, so often we're really scared of our power, our light, what we can, possibly do in our life. And we shut ourselves down, but the really empowerment is learning that from the inside that you can do amazing things, that you can do difficult things if you set your mind to it. But we kind of, we go on automatic pilot, we get stressed out, and we're constantly kind of, instead of being powerful and empowered, we're going to these dopamine rushes, right? So we're going to the threesome with Ben and Jerry's, we're going to the Netflix, maybe we're drinking too much, we're shopping, we're doing all of this stuff instead of feeling empowered and confident and doing those things that we know that we're supposed to do, whether that's being a better parent, taking better care of our bodies, writing that book, volunteering. But, if you're listening to this, you are powerful. If you're not happy with your life, then it's time to do something about it. If you're really tired of procrastinating because maybe there's some fear there, or yes, it's hard. I have to say, I'll come right out and say, rocking your midlife is hard. I know you, Kevin, I'm sure, starting a new business, right? Yeah. It is hard, but
and it's scary too, right? I think a lot of people, that, to your point, fear gets them stuck, and that's that place of not empowerment, right? So it's moving from that helplessness to understanding that you do have that agency, you have that control over your life, and working on ways to muster the courage to make that change, and then the grit and the determination to see it through. But you absolutely have that empowerment, to your point, right?
Yeah, and I would say, just to pick up on some things that you said, courage comes from the word core, which is the French word for heart. So it really means, empowerment really means tuning into your heart. When you get to the end of your life, I mean, if you're listening, you're at midlife, you've got, 20, 30, maybe even 40 years. I mean, I'm making it to 100. When you look back at your life at this moment, what do you want your life to have stood for? Which sort of goes back to that, first step of authenticity. What are your core values? What are your strengths? What are you here for? Are you doing those things? And if it's scary, then you're moving in the right direction. I mean, I try to do everything every day that scares me, whether that is, getting in front of bigger stages, putting myself out there, doing something, trying something new, but you've got to break out of that stuckness. And you're right. Fear really keeps you stuck. It's trying to protect you, but it's keeping you small, and it's keeping you from, rocking your midlife.
Yeah, and that's why we're here. We're trying to move past that and move into rocking our midlife. And I love how these steps are all building on one another as we move through them. So that was step 5. We're going to move from that helplessness to this state of empowerment and being in charge. And step 6 is to rehab our relationships from me to we. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, this is a key one, because what's going to happen is, as you start to rock your midlife, as you start to show up authentically, love yourself, take better care of your energy and your body, work on your mind, feel empowered, the people around you are going to go what's up? And not all of them are going to like it. I know my situation, where I started becoming more empowered, loving myself. I was in a marriage that was just not great for me. I was like a caged tiger. That I wanted freedom, I wanted empowerment, and I was with someone who was very controlling. And so when you start to change, not everyone's going to you're going to have some people who are going to be right on, especially if you have, friends. The people who really love you and care about you are going to love the change. I mean, you're not even going to look the same. I don't look the way that I did 5 years ago. Your physical shift will start to, I'm sure you find this when you work with clients, as they start to work on their bodies, they change not just their physicality, but even their faces, their energy changes. So rehabbing relationships there's a couple steps here within this step. The first thing is, you've got to let your people pleaser, I call it the good girl, but it could be the good girl, the good guy. You got to let that go, because we are really trained as children to listen to our parents, to listen to our caregivers. And so we actually develop this self-critic that keeps us in place to keep us safe. Again, it's that brain. So much of our behavior is put in place, before we're 10 years old. So you got to really question, okay, I've had so many clients who have been I can't do this. People are going to be upset with me. And you've got to let the good girl go and start doing what pleases you. So that's the first part. The second part is, you've got to create some boundaries. You've got to create what I call, your Bill of Rights. I have a right to say no, take care of myself, have freedom, have joy, feel all my feelings. So you have to start thinking about, what's my personal Bill of Rights? And then thinking about, if someone crosses my boundary, if someone, yells at me, tries to control me, or puts me, in a difficult situation, I get to say, no, thank you. I can't do this right now. I know somebody else who can. You need to really work that little word called no, create some boundaries, telling people what are the consequences when they cross the line. Like when your kid, doesn't do the dishes or leaves his or her backpack out. What are you going to do when, and your spouse is supposed to be home at 6 and you're going to go on a date and, he or she doesn't show up? What's the consequence of that? You have to set some boundaries and let people know what the consequences are, say no, follow through. And then the third piece is something called nonviolent communications. I mean, it is a way of communicating that was developed by a man named Marshall Rosenberg. And it basically has 4 parts, which are, you make an observation. So just going back to, let's say, again, your kid doesn't clean up after themselves. So, hey, Johnny, I noticed that you made yourself dinner. You didn't clean up after yourself. That's the first place. You observe it objectively, and then you state how it makes you feel. It makes me feel like you just don't care about me, that you're just not doing your part as a family member. Then you state what you need them to do. I need you to respect our communal space. And then the fourth part is that you make a request. I'm requesting that if you make yourself food, that you clean up after yourself. Super easy, but you're not putting people on the defensive. It's been out there for quite a long time. It's super effective. It's a great way to communicate, get your needs met. Because again, as you're rocking midlife, you need people to help you and support you, right? You need to shift. When you start to shift who you are, you need to sort of direct other people how to stay in line to support the growth and change that you are seeing in your life.
Yeah, I think that's very interesting because unfortunately, to your point, not everybody's going to be on board with change. And the more radical that change might be, the more other people, close people could be resistant. I've had cases where people don't have, say, a spouse or a partner that's particularly on board with change. And that's really tough, right? And that can be a barrier to change and something you might need to develop this, what you call it, a personal bill of rights, right? And understand what is and what isn't acceptable. I love the way that you bring up nonviolent communication. I never really thought about that. And I wondered where you were going with, maybe comparing that to violent communication. But very typically, yeah. So my kids are out of the house, obviously, but when they were here, if they left a mess, my message to them would be, hey, what's the matter with you? You absolutely know that that's not acceptable. Go do the dishes. And that's very confrontational and puts them in a confrontational space as opposed to the way you just framed that. Certainly a much more reasonable way of communicating. But to your point, yeah, we need a community of supportive people in this stage of our life. And for all the craziness that social media is, I find that is actually, there are now these virtual communities, right? Because go back a decade or two, that wasn't an option. Your community was going to be people that you were physically around, but now we can have these virtual communities. They can be global communities that can support us. They can have the same goals as us. So I think there's a lot happening. There's a lot more resources for building this, moving from me to we, this supportive group of folks around you. I love that.
Yeah,
So
I think Instagram is awesome for that. I'm finding great.
it really is.
Support.
Yeah. I went into it. I mean, gosh, it was just over when I started this endeavor just a little over a year ago. My daughter helped me set up a Facebook and an Instagram, and I did it thinking, well, it's a necessary evil. I want to get in this space of health and wellness and personal trainer, and you have to have it. And you do. That's just the table stakes. And I find myself really enjoying it because now one of the reasons I started this whole initiative is I was so passionate about the change that I saw in myself. I wanted to share it with people. Well, there's only so many people that I come into contact with physically every day that are, and after a while they get tired of me going on and on about this. And I found this whole community of other people. There's really two sides to that. There's a community of people that are just like me that are really into health and fitness and are trying to spread that message. And then there's a whole community of people that are like, well, wait, I want that. That's where I want to go. And those are really the people I want to reach out and touch, right? I want to bring them along and shine a light that this is the way this is what we want to normalize, is you being healthy and you being active and you feeling good about yourself. So certainly all of the steps that we've talked to are important and leading up to that kind of a midlife transformation as opposed to, say, a midlife crisis, right?
Yeah, I think we have the crisis because we are feeling so stuck inside and we're thinking that sports car, that affair, that thing that people tend to do, quitting their job. And we do these crazy radical things. But the problem is we need to change inside first. And so I think that's a lesson that I've really learned working with people and working with myself is that it's really an inside out world, because if you change the outside and the inside doesn't change, you're going to realize that sports car isn't really doing for you. And maybe when you first get it, you're like, oh, this is great. Or the fair feels all exciting and fabulous. But then you're like, the ramifications, it just isn't the inside change. When you change from the inside, what happens is what shows up on the outside, what you end up manifesting is really what's going to truly make you happy.
Very, very well said. So that's a great segue into our seventh and final step here, enlighten yourself, from bottomed out to lifted up. So we've gone through all of these steps now, and we're moving into this enlightened state. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, well, the first thing about, enlightenment is, I guess, making kind of a switch and starting understanding that you are a spiritual being having a human experience. I think it changes your whole perspective when you see, you know what?